Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining our study of the Holy Scriptures today. We're studying questions that Jesus asked. And in Jesus' teaching, one of the ways in which he taught was by a series of questions, questioning individuals. And of course, the object of it was to make them think. And making them think was that would cause them to have an attitude of perhaps receiving other information that they were lacking in. For instance, we find on one occasion that Jesus was talking to an individual or to a group of individuals and asked them, "What do you think about Christ? Whose son is he?" And, of course, the answer seemed easy, but there was more to that question than they realized. And then there are other questions that Jesus asked. And so today we come to another question that Jesus asked. But first, he was asked a question. When we look in the book of Luke, at the 10th chapter, we find the story of a lawyer that came to the master. And he came to the master and he asked the master, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" Well, that was the lawyer's question. And Jesus says, "Well, you read. What do you think?" And so the lawyer cited from the book of Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter, and verse 4, these words: "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and thy soul, thy mind, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." Jesus says, "That's right." And then the man asked him a question. He said, "And who's my neighbor?" Now, as we look at this question, Jesus didn't answer it until first he gave a parable. And answering the question that the man asked, "Who is my neighbor?" he not only taught him a lesson, but he teaches us a lesson. And as he talked to this individual who had asked the question, "Well, who's my neighbor? I'm to love my neighbor as myself. Who is my neighbor?" Jesus gave the parable about a Jew that was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. And as he went down the way, he fell among robbers, and they beat him half dead and stripped him of the things that he had. They just left him lying by the side of the road. Well, other travelers passed that way, and a Jew like him, but who was a priest, walked down that road. And he looked at the Jew in the ditch, but he just passed by on the other side. And then after a moment, another individual came by. He was also a Jew, but he was a Levite. Now, both of these were ones that were in the service of the temple. And this one looked at him, but then he passed by on the other side. Neither one of these that were of his nationality offered to help him one whit. But on the other hand, another individual came by. He was a Samaritan. And as we looked, he looked at him. And he had compassion on him. And first he ministered what he could that would temporarily relieve him of some of the pain that he had. He poured oil and wine on his wounds, bound them up. And then because certainly the man was unable or was weak, he put that man that had been afflicted and beaten and robbed on his own mount. Means of individuals or the person or the thing that he was riding, whether it was a donkey or whatever else it was. He put it on him, and then, of course, he walked. And then he went to the nearest inn, and he ministered further to him. And when the day and the night had passed, he got up the next morning, and he gave the innkeeper a couple of monies and said, "Now you take care of him, and when I come back, if you need more, then I'll repay you." Now, this was a story of interest because as we are looking at the individuals that are involved in this parable, you're looking at some people that are religious people. Here was a Jew. Those that were ones that ministered in the temple to which he went and offered his sacrifices was a priest. He offered the sacrifices. He was the one that, if he was a high priest, he entered into the Holy of Holies once a year and made sacrifice for all the people. But if he was was a Levite, well, he just ministered about the different things. He didn't offer the sacrifices, but he did minister about the temple services. And he also was a person that was ministering supposedly for the benefit of the Jewish people. Now, what we're looking at, comparable in our own language today, we're looking about, here's a man that's a member of a church, and the preacher of that church looks at him, but he didn't help him. And it may be an elder or a deacon or a steward looks at him also, and he didn't help him. But here is a man that's a Samaritan. Now, Samaritan was a person that the Jew hated. He hated him. There was nothing that an individual could say good about the Samaritan. And we look at that, and one of the greatest insults that might be passed on to somebody else will say, you're a Samaritan. Here was that despised and hated person. And what did that person do? Well, now, the priest hadn't helped him, and the Levite hadn't helped him. But now, here is a person that there is enmity as far as national and the nations are concerned, and yet that person had compassion on him. He was one that took the individual that was hurt. He ministered to him. He was one, did so at his own expense, made provisions for a thing. And the Lord said to the man, now, who proved neighbor to that man? Well, the lawyer, I don't know whether he just was unwilling to say a Samaritan, but he knew who it was that proved neighbor, because he said, well, him that assisted him, he was his neighbor. And that was right. And Jesus said, yes, you go and do likewise. There's a powerful lesson in this, my friends, and that is, who is my neighbor? My neighbor is the person that needs my help. Sometimes, he may be a person that I don't like or who doesn't like me. He may even be, in the case of the Jew and the Samaritan, his enemy. But if he's a fellow creature, just like me, and he needs my help, then God said, I have to love him. I have to help him. I have to minister to him in his needs, just like I love myself. There's a wonderful lesson in that. Wouldn't it be wonderful if in our world today that everyone practiced what these two great commandments teach us to do? That we are to first in our lives put God first. He must come first. But none is ever injured by putting God first. You just put God first in your life, my friend, and you'll learn and you'll see how much more blessed your life is, how happy you are, and how things fit together and come together just like a puzzle or fit like a glove on a hand. Your life will be easier, happier, if you put God first. But then the second one is love my neighbor as myself. Help those that need my help. Sometimes maybe somebody I don't like or someone that doesn't like me. Nevertheless, God said, that's what I must do. And I have not complied with the law of God, not done his will for me if I do other than that. How blessed our world would be today if every person in it would keep the first commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, spirit. And keep the second. Love your neighbor as yourself. I assure you, our world would not have the wars it has. That's not going to ever happen. But if I practice it, I can find peace with God and peace for myself. Thank you for listening.